Somewhere out there, someone your age already knows the exact day they'll never need a paycheck again. Not because they won the lottery, not because they inherited a fortune, not because they built an app and sold it for millions. They know the day because they calculated it, with one formula. A formula you've probably never seen written down, even though it decides the single biggest question of your financial life. How much money is enough? Ask most people that question, and you'll get a shrug. A guess. A number pulled from thin air. 1 million? 2 million? 10? Here's what nobody's telling you. Enough isn't a feeling. It's an engineering specification. And like any specification, it can be reverse engineered, tested against failure, and written down on one line. Today, you're going to do exactly that. You're going to take retirement, this vague, distant, fog-covered idea, and turn it into a number you could calculate on the back of a napkin before your coffee gets cold. It starts with a study most people have never heard of. In the late 1990s, a group of professors at Trinity University in Texas asked a deceptively simple question. If someone stops working and starts living off their investments, how much can they safely withdraw each year without running out of money before they run out of life? They didn't guess. They ran the numbers through history. Every retirement starting year going back decades. Booms, crashes, wars, inflation spikes, recoveries. For each starting point, they tested a portfolio of stocks and bonds and simulated a retiree pulling money out year after year for 30 years. The result became known as the 4% rule. Withdraw 4% of your portfolio in your first year of retirement. Adjust that amount for inflation every year after. Historically, across almost every 30-year period they tested, the money survived. In many cases, it didn't just survive, it grew. 4%. Remember that number, because hidden inside it is the answer to the question you actually care about. One detail before you move on, because it trips people up. The rule doesn't mean you withdraw 4% of whatever the portfolio happens to be worth each year. You calculate 4% once, in year one, and then that dollar amount simply rises with inflation. Say you retire with 1 million. Year one, you withdraw 40,000. If inflation runs at 3% that year, year two, you withdraw 41,200, regardless of what the market did. Your lifestyle stays constant in real terms. The portfolio absorbs the volatility, not your grocery budget. That's the design. The structure flexes so you don't have to. Flip it around. If you can safely spend 4% of your portfolio each year, how big does the portfolio need to be to cover your spending? Divide 100 by 4. You get 25. That's the entire formula. Your annual spending multiplied by 25. That's your number. That's what enough looks like, written as math. Spend $40,000 a year. 40,000 times 25 is 1 million. Spend 30,000, 750,000. Spend 60,000, 1.5 million. One multiplication. That's the whole mystery, the entire secret that sounds so impossibly complicated when people talk about retiring early. 25 times your annual spending. Notice something strange about that formula? Look at what's in it. And more importantly, look at what isn't. Your salary is nowhere in that equation. Nowhere. The formula doesn't care what you earn. It only cares what you spend. And that changes everything about how this game actually works. Picture two engineers. Both are 30 years old. The first one earns $150,000 a year and spends $120,000 of it. The second earns $70,000 and spends $35,000. Ask the average person which one retires first, and they'll point at the big salary without hesitating. Run the actual numbers. The first engineer needs $120,000 times 25, $3 million, and they're only saving $30,000 a year toward it. The second engineer needs $35,000 times 25, $875,000, and they're saving $35,000 a year, more than the person earning double their salary. The high earner is chasing a target more than 3 times bigger with a smaller engine. The modest earner crosses the finish line decades earlier. Every dollar of extra spending doesn't just cost you $1. It adds $25 to the mountain you have to climb. Cut your spending by $10,000 a year, and your retirement target drops by $250,000, instantly. No investment genius required. This is why your savings rate, the percentage of your income you keep, is the single most powerful variable in this entire machine. Not your stock picks, not your timing, not your salary. The gap between what you earn and what you spend, expressed as a percentage. The math on this is almost uncomfortably simple. Save 10% of your income, and you'll need roughly half a century of working to buy your freedom. Push that to 25%, and it drops to around 30 years. 50%, and you're looking at roughly 17 years. Push to 65 or 70%. Extreme, but people do it, and the whole journey compresses to about a decade. Read those numbers again slowly. A person who starts at 22 and saves half their income can be done in their late 30s. Not done working forever, necessarily. Done needing to. There's a difference, and it's the difference this entire calculation is really about. Why does the savings rate compress time so violently? Because it attacks the problem from both ends at once. Every extra percent you save does two jobs simultaneously. It adds fuel, more money flowing into the portfolio every month, growing and compounding. And it shrinks the target, because spending less now usually means needing less later, which means a smaller mountain in the first place. It's the only lever in personal finance that pushes and pulls at the same time. An investment return only grows the pile. A raise only grows the fuel, and only if you don't spend it. The savings rate does both, which is why a modest income with a high savings rate beats a high income with a low one, almost every single time the math is run. But you're not here for the brochure version. You're here for the stress test. So let's do what an engineer does with any load-bearing structure. Let's try to break it. First crack in the design. The original study tested 30-year retirements. That was fine for someone retiring at 65. But if you stop working at 40, your money might need to survive 50 years, not 30. And over longer periods, the failure rate of the 4% rule creeps up. It doesn't collapse, but the safety margin thins. Many careful planners quietly adjust to 3.5% for very long retirements, which changes the multiplier from 25 to about 28 or 29 times annual spending. Slightly bigger mountain. Same math, second crack. The study was built on the historical returns of the American stock market during a century when it happened to be the best-performing market on the planet. Will the next 50 years look like the last 100? Nobody knows. Not the optimists, not the doomsayers, not anyone selling you certainty in either direction. The honest answer is that 4% is not a law of physics. It's a well-tested engineering estimate, built from the best crash data available. Third crack, and this one is the sneakiest. The order of returns matters. Imagine two retirees with identical portfolios and identical average returns over 30 years. One retires into a bull market, the other into a crash. The averages match. The outcomes don't. The one who hits a crash in the first few years, while withdrawing money at the bottom, can drain the portfolio so deeply it never recovers, even when the market does. Engineers have a name for this kind of thing. A resonance failure. The right force, at exactly the wrong moment, breaks a structure that would have survived the same force at any other time. So does all this mean the formula is useless? Ask yourself what an engineer would say. No structure is failure-proof. That was never the goal. The goal is knowing your failure modes and designing margins around them. A slightly lower withdrawal rate. A year or two of expenses held in cash, so you're not selling investments during a crash. Flexibility to trim spending in bad years, small design changes, massive gains in survival probability. Here's the twist buried in all of this, the part almost everyone misses. The 4% rule was never really about retirement. Think about what the number actually represents. 25 times your annual spending is the point where your money generates your life. Every year, your portfolio produces roughly what you consume. Work becomes optional. Not forbidden. Optional. Plenty of people who hit their number keep working, sometimes at the same job. So what did they buy, if not a beach chair? They bought the ability to say no. No to a boss who crosses a line. No to a job that quietly eats their health. No to staying in a city they hate, a role they've outgrown, a schedule that costs them their kids' childhoods. Every multiple of your annual spending that you accumulate is a year of no sitting in an account. 5 years of spending saved isn't retirement. but it's 5 years of choices most people around you don't have. And that reframe changes the timeline, too. You don't wake up powerless for 30 years and then suddenly free on the day you hit 25 times. At 5 times annual spending, you can survive almost any layoff without panic. At 10 times, you can take a sabbatical, change careers, start something risky. At 15, work part-time and let compounding drag you the rest of the way while you barely add another cent. Freedom isn't a cliff you finally reach. It's a dial that starts turning with your very first saved multiple. Now look at your own life through this lens, just for a moment. You already know roughly what you spend in a year. Maybe not to the cent, but close enough for a first calculation. Multiply it by 25, right now, in your head. That number you just calculated, probably for the first time in your life, is the specification. Not a fantasy, not a guru's promise. A load requirement, sitting there in plain arithmetic, waiting for a structure to be designed underneath it. Is it a big number? Almost certainly. Does it feel impossible? Maybe today. But here's what changed in the last 10 minutes. Yesterday, enough was fog. A vague someday, defined by feelings and headlines and other people's opinions. Today, it has a value. And anything with a value can be engineered toward. Broken into savings rates, mapped onto years, stress-tested against crashes, adjusted as your life changes. The distance between you and that number matters far less than the fact that the number finally exists. Because somewhere out there, someone your age already knows the exact day they'll never need a paycheck again. And as of right now, so do you. You just calculated it.